The investigation started on the morning of March 28, 1979, when a motorist discovered the body of a young woman in a ditch along Papermill Road.
Sheila Stead was 16 years old when she was found murdered alongside Papermill Road in Winchester, Virginia. She was found at approximately 9 a.m. on March 28, 1979, by a passing motorist who immediately called the police. She was last seen alive on the evening of March 27th, leaving her home on Shawnee Drive, only 2 miles away from where her body would be found. Hello and welcome to Close Range Crime. My name is Ray, and today we are here with yet another unsolved case, this time from Virginia. This case has been in the local media, but the last mention of Sheila Stead in the press would be in 2014. 10 years later, here we are with no update and no one who has been charged or convicted for her murder. It's very clear when researching the case that the majority of everyone who was in the community at the time and even in the community now have a belief on who killed her. I'm going to walk you through the public details, and I'm going to share with you some information that others have permitted me to share. I'm also going to show you key areas, what they look like in August of 2024. I have to say with this case, I had more people reach out to me and then refuse to answer me in this case than probably every case I've covered so far combined. It was really bizarre, but we'll get into it as we go. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into it. This is Sheila Stead's story. Unfortunately, this is the only photo that I could find of her, but Sheila Kay Stead had beautiful strawberry blonde hair that was just a little past her shoulders. With dark eyes and a beautiful smile, she made friends easily, and she was considered by many to be very sweet, very kind, and just a very genuine person. She liked kids and would babysit for her family. One of her friends that spoke with me said that when they were in middle school together, Sheila was very studious. She made great grades, and additionally, she loved to be around her friends in school. She loved to socialize. They also attended Shenandoah Valley Baptist Church, and Sheila was a singer. She loved to sing songs, especially church songs. That friend also told me that Sheila confided in her a little bit, saying that she didn't really care for her stepfather, that he really didn't like her to leave the home. He was very controlling, and he just had a really tight leash on her. This case reminded me a lot, and I mean a lot, of another case I did a deep dive on, the case of Lori Zimmerman, a 15-year-old girl from Hagerstown, Maryland, who was killed in 1985. And like Lori, Sheila is consistently being described as caring, sweet, just this very good-natured, kind-hearted, innocent girl. She even volunteered at a nursing home, just like Lori did. These cases were 6 years apart in time and about 45 miles in distance, but both with the same terrible outcome. Both endured SA at some point in their lives, and both would die by asphyxiation, being dumped like trash on the side of a lonely road. The Steads lived in Winchester, Virginia, and that area was very safe in 1979, and honestly, overall, it's still very safe right now. In 1979, according to this map, there was a population of about 20,800 people, and today that number well surpasses 27,000. In 1979 in particular, the Winchester National Register Historic District is established, and that covers a 45-block area downtown. Winchester sits within Frederick County, Virginia. Aside from Shenandoah University and the local mall, not much else sits within this 9 square mile city. Unless you knew Sheila, no one would have guessed that Sheila endured the type of things that she did, that she had such an unstable and abusive home life. But that is exactly what she lived with every day, according to quite a few people. She lived on Shawnee Drive with her biological mother, Shirley, and her stepfather, James. At the time, she also had a sister that was 8 years old that was living in the house. Allegations came out and were repeatedly put in the newspaper that both Shirley and James physically and sexually assaulted Sheila. According to one of the investigators that has worked the case, then detective, but now Sheriff Bohr, he was quoted saying that the sexual and physical abuse was reported by Sheila's own sister and that both the biological mother and stepfather were the abusers. I attempted to interview Casey Bohr, however, he declined my request for an interview. Sheila was last seen on the evening of Tuesday, March 27th, 1979, leaving her parents' home. It's not clear who last saw her, the direction she was walking in, or where she intended to go. You can see here that the neighborhood that she lived in is very compact, but it's hard to say what that looked like in 1979. If anyone who lived in the area at the time or who knew of that area at the time could please leave a comment below to let me know what that area was like. I'm very curious about that. I think it could let us know how likely it was that she would have been noticed walking away from her home by a neighbor, or if it's more likely that her parents reported last seeing her. Considering her parents' involvement and the history, I think it's really important to know. Now, again, this was on a Tuesday night, and Sheila went to public school. It's March, so she would have been expected to be in school on the following day. The thing is, the parents did not report her missing until 12 hours after her body was actually found. So approximately 9 p.m. on Wednesday, March 28th. And the thing is, Sheila did not have any history of ever running away or being absent like this. Sheila remained a Jane Doe for a while, 4 days actually, and it's unclear on exactly how she was identified. There was, quote, lack of cooperation amongst the city and police. The city police were basically tasked with the missing persons case, while the county police were tasked with trying to find out who this dead teenager was and figuring out what exactly happened to her. Now, we have seen time and time again in many different cases across the United States where lack of cooperation amongst law enforcement agencies delays the entire process of getting justice for these victims. We have no idea what family member it was, but one of Sheila's kin attempted to identify her, believing that the information that they were hearing on the news matched Sheila's description. But that person said that they were turned away without being permitted to see her body. We don't know if this happened 12 hours after she was found, 24 hours, 72 hours, or if it happened before the police knew who they had. If it was early in those first 4 days, this could have been a big mistake made by police. But if it was done after they knew who Sheila was, there could have been a very strategic reason for this, and that reason would have stemmed from looking and digging into the family dynamics. I would understand if you would want to create a barrier there while you investigate. Now, I've had comments in some of my other videos, as well as from people just generally speaking to me on social media, that I should request a FOIA for information like this that I can't find. However, I will tell you, I would bet money that 100% of the time when I request a FOIA for something like this, a case that is unsolved, I am going to get absolutely no answers. I am just a regular citizen, and to be honest, I've even had former and prior law enforcement tell me that they can't even get information like that after they leave law enforcement. Even when you request a FOIA on a case that's been solved, it's not guaranteed you're going to get all the information. Many of the times, there are many things that are redacted in those requests. It just kind of seems to be how it works. So again, we don't know where Sheila was going that Tuesday evening or if she ever reached her destination. And honestly, we don't even know if she had a specific destination in mind. She did volunteer at a nursing home, which is still standing but operates today as a physical therapy office. It would have been very practical for her to walk there as it was less than 1 mile from her home. Did she have a shift at that nursing home? Was she heading to a friend's house or out to meet with friends, maybe even a boyfriend? Was she just out walking to get away from her toxic household? Did she even leave the home on her own 2 feet at all? And who was the last to report seeing her that Tuesday evening? All we know for sure is that her body would be found on Papermill Road, approximately 3 miles away from her house. She was clothed, but she had visible bruising on her neck, and the autopsy would conclude that she was strangled to death. When I visited the location, I had no one to guide me, so I didn't know exactly where Sheila's body was dumped. I attempted to reach out several times and in several different ways to a retired investigator who worked on the case for years, but I got no response from him either, despite him having his own podcast on unsolved crimes in the area. I always seek out information on social media, and despite numerous comments and shares, getting actual solid information from anyone, family, friends, local investigators, cooperation here was just very poor overall. I even did background checks on some of the family members and could not find one person in her family that would respond to me and keep in contact with me. Now, it is totally possible that my messages didn't reach them, but generally, overall, the responses that I did get and the lack thereof, it's just very unusual in comparison to other cases that I've researched and reported on. I even had contact with one of her friends who at first was willing to speak with me and then ghosted me. Again, not something I have happen very often from friends and family members of a victim, but here we are. So I captured Papermill Road as it was in August of 2024. I do know that there were factories in the area at this time, so the area was at least somewhat well traveled back then. And again, she was found the next morning, so she must not have been hidden very well, if at all. That's an important detail we'll get into a bit more when we talk about the theories. So Tuesday evening, Sheila is last seen walking away from her home. And Wednesday morning around 9 a.m., her body is found and she's listed as a Jane Doe. Around 9 p.m. that night, her parents report her missing. 4 days later, she's finally publicly identified. 5 days later, County Sheriff's Office investigator Robert Edmondson told the Winchester Star that he had identified suspects and would be making an arrest within the week. I cannot find an update as to the possible interference here, what happened that made the direction of this case change to now being unsolved for 45 years. As far as the media attention and updates, they are truly scarce. There was a reopening of the case in 1986 by then Winchester City Police Detective, now Sheriff, Lenny Mulholland. I can tell you that Casey Boer joined the Holland in 2008, and in 2010, they were successful in getting a search warrant for family medical records, specifically for Sheila's siblings' pediatric records. Boer had interviewed Sheila's sister Jamie, the sister that was 8 when this happened. Of course, she is now an adult. And as an adult, she confirmed allegations of sexual and physical abuse towards Sheila by the hands of her caregiver. We don't know exactly what came of obtaining those records, but we do know that it's reported new evidence that was gathered in 2010. It was helpful in warming up the case in 2011.
Winchester, nearly 32 years after the body of 16-year-old Sheila Stead was found, local prosecutors have called for the creation of a multi-jurisdictional grand jury to investigate her unsolved murder. This case has not been forgotten, Frederick County Commonwealth's Attorney Glenn Williamson said Friday. He and Winchester Commonwealth's Attorney Alex Iden have asked the Virginia Supreme Court to authorize the creation of the grand jury, which would draw jurors from Winchester and Frederick and Clark counties and have special powers to investigate, subpoena witnesses, and issue indictments. If the Supreme Court authorizes the investigative body's creation, it would be the first time in 3 decades that Stead's murder has been brought before a grand jury. Over the years, different investigators have taken the case up, but now we're making a concerted effort to resolve it, Iden said.
Unfortunately, they just must have been shut down from the beginning, because after that initial request, the announcement of that in the newspapers, the case has basically fallen out of media attention altogether. Casey Boer has stated a few times throughout the investigation to the press that the parents, mom and stepdad, were the main source of the investigation. Both of them have since passed, which may give some indication as to why we haven't heard any more from law enforcement in the recent years. When it comes to theories, 2 seem to be floating around online. What I've come to realize is that the theory that is believed most, the one that is highly shared, is shared amongst those who were closest to Sheila before she was killed, mostly people who knew her. It also is a theory that has structure to it, logic to it, and you already know what that theory is, that Sheila's mom and stepfather had direct knowledge of her murder, that one of them or both of them killed her. If the allegations of physical and sexual abuse are accurate, they have hella motive. We can look at the possibility that this would be first-degree premeditated murder, and the motive was likely to shut her up. It wouldn't be that unusual that as Sheila was getting older, she was becoming more resistant or combative, harder to control. And the parents possibly could have been fed up with it. Maybe they thought that they were going to go to jail, or maybe they were just tired of her being non-compliant and decided to kill her. If we look at second-degree unpremeditated murder, it's possible that the abuse led to her death, that the parents finally took it too far and she was killed. Unintentionally killed, but was killed. We know that it's not unlikely for violent offenders to continue to get more and more violent. Were her mom and her stepdad the last ones to have seen her? Why did they wait so long to report her missing? And think about the fact that Sheila told her friend that her stepdad was so controlling. If that were the case, and I have no reason to believe that it wasn't, would it make any sense at all whatsoever that he wouldn't report her missing, considering that fact? In a town that's relatively small, would it have been possible for the Steads to be unaware that a body was found on Papermill Road, only 2 miles from their home? Because me personally, I think that the second you heard that, you would be kicking down the doors of the sheriff's office in order to see if that was your daughter, knowing that she never returned home the prior night when she was supposed to. I think that the fact that she was left on a road that it was at least moderately traveled and she was left to where she was found so easily says that the killers knew her. Killers who tend to have guilt tend to make sure that a body will be found sooner rather than later, especially back then because DNA wasn't prevalent. There wouldn't be a need to conceal the body because of DNA that would be found. I would want to know the routine of the Stead household, what a typical weekday looked like, and if their routine was interrupted in the days prior to her murder as well as after. I had one person reach out to me to tell me that Sheila's older sister and boyfriend were actually staying in the basement of the Stead home. I only heard this once and I could not fact check it in any way. But if this were the case, I would want to know what they knew, because they probably knew a lot. What did they see, hear, witness in the days before and after her death? Something that I find very odd is that the only thing that you can find online about Sheila's case is coming from either old newspaper reports or a couple of posts from friends. There is no justice for Sheila page, no in memory of Sheila page. There is no footprint at all from her family, specifically her 2 sisters and brother. They're not seeking out justice or information, and that begs the question, do they already have their answers? In addition to that, I can't see where any of her siblings have fought for their mom and stepdad's innocence. And again, it is out there very, very publicly that police and those close to Sheila are certain her parents are responsible. In the midst of my research, I received this message, but again, when I responded several times, my messages were all ignored. Nonetheless, this is what was said. Please message me, as I was a witness in the Stead case when they reopened it approximately 14 years ago. I took care of Shirley when she was in the nursing home, and she had some confessions when they reopened the case. I do know that Shirley was in a nursing home for a bit before passing away, and that's public information. But take this with a grain of salt, considering the fact that this person cut off contact with me for no apparent reason. The other theory that is less spread, less believed, but nonetheless, it's still out there. It's muddy, it's murky. It involves a winding trail of corruption involving the police and a judge. And as open-minded as I try to be, I can say I'm having a very hard time getting behind this, and I'm going to explain why. From what I've researched, this theory seems to have spread amongst just a handful of people who appear to have never known Sheila. Also, I can't find anyone who put this theory out there that will talk to me on or off the record. Now, you could say that if it was true that law enforcement corruption is present, that maybe they are scared to talk. But these people are just throwing these random leads out at me under their real name and then just not responding when I ask for clarification or ask questions to find logic in this theory. If it was fear, they would have started out being anonymous from the beginning, right? Because the theory is out there, and I did have a few sources pointing in that direction. I did want to discuss it. I did not want anyone to think that I was ignoring it or that I was unaware of it. So the basics go like this. There was talk that Sheila was dating a police deputy at the time she was murdered and that he was responsible. Something happened and he snapped. That this then turned into a cover-up involving several detectives and a judge, and it ended up clouding the investigation. They're all working together to cover up this murder. Now, this theory was provided directly to me by two family members who heard this theory within the family. Neither appear to be in contact with one another, at least not on social media. They appear to be distant relatives. Again, this information was thrown at me, and then they cut off contact after I asked more questions. One family member I spoke to said that they would get back to me with more clarification after speaking to their mom, and despite numerous attempts to reach them, I could never get a response. Obviously, considering the fact that the leading theory was that her parents were responsible for her murder, the fact that this theory is reported from family, it does raise an eyebrow. Because what better way to take attention off of your family than to blame someone else and to scream cover up and corruption, right? Because that's so hard to prove. Now, I'm not sure that that is what's going on here, but I do tend to have a skeptical mind, so I dug as deep as I could. And what I found is that back in 2013, this theory was heavily spread by one specific person on social media having the title of writer. And this person allegedly went to the family with their information. I am not going to put her name out here, although you can find it if you want, but I just want to ask, does this look like the words, the sentences, the paragraphs of a writer? Now, this person hasn't been active on Facebook since 2017. I can't find them active anywhere else. And I was unable to reach her despite being given other means of contact. I cannot help but wonder if this theory stemmed from the parents who then sought this person out, or perhaps this person sought the parents out and brought the theory to them. I do not think that the two family members who reached out to me and giving this lead had any ill will or malice in providing the information. I believe that this is what was told to them down the line in their family, and that some family members probably do believe it. After all, I think it is so much easier to believe that there's corruption going on than to want to believe that your own family member, that they're capable of killing their own child. But guys, do your own research. This is just my opinion on this theory. Now, you always have the possibility that this was a random crime. I heard from someone who believed that Sheila was abducted, and this person is one who did maintain contact with me. She had knowledge that back in the late 70s and into the 80s that there was a couple of men who were abducting and essaying girls at the local mall. Now, the mall would have been 2 miles away from Sheila's home, and the mall was almost dead center between her home and where her body was dumped. Nothing was actually reported in the news about finding signs of SA in the autopsy, but that does not mean that it didn't happen and that this wasn't kept as holdback information. We know that it's not unlikely for police to keep information held back because if anyone ever confesses and they cannot confirm those details, then they can determine whether or not that person is the actual person responsible or not. Now, she was found clothed, which from my limited knowledge does seem to be less common when there are cases of SA and then murder. But that's not enough to say that this wasn't a random crime. However, statistically, most murders occur in the hands of someone the victim knows. Not being able to rule this theory out is likely one of the main obstacles the police faced when attempting to bring Shirley and James in for a jury trial. Now, according to reports, evidence was very scarce. Personally, I think something was found in those medical records of her siblings in 2010 that then led to the detectives pressing for a trial. It just didn't seem to be enough. And now that Shirley and James have died, I am not sure that any more will ever happen with this case, if we'll ever hear anything else from law enforcement. But I did want to tell her story. Now, an interesting note is that on Shirley and James' obituary, despite other deceased family members being listed, Sheila was omitted from both. And I don't know who was responsible for those, but I personally think that that's a clue that the family believes they are responsible for killing Sheila, that they don't deserve to have Sheila's name on their obituary. Sheila's case is one that just did not get the attention it deserved. Detective Mulholland was quoted saying that we failed Sheila. And I think that statement, to hold yourself and the department publicly accountable like that, I think that puts a lot of weight on the fact that these investigators really did try to solve the case. I know my personal opinion is probably going to upset some, and that's okay. Remember, I am a victim's advocate, not a detective, so I could be completely wrong on my assessment of the case. I think we can all agree, though, that Sheila deserves justice and her case should not just sit on a shelf to collect dust or sit in the back of a file cabinet to be forgotten. I encourage everyone to respectfully discuss theories and opinions in the comment section. And if anyone wants to email me personally with information, my email is listed in the description. I just ask that if I respond, you give me information back. Thank you for taking the time to hear Sheila's story. And if you would like to check out Lori Zimmerman's story, the girl that I said was also murdered and had a lot of similarities to Sheila, that link is going to be here. Major updates and corrections on cases, I put those in the description below and also on the Close Range Crime Facebook page. Tips on Sheila's case can be sent to Frederick County investigators at 540-662-6162. There is a link in the email, but just please be sure to note that the email listed on this webpage is no longer active. If you have any case suggestions, feel free to email me as well. Please subscribe and like this video. It helps support me in bringing these cases to you. I want to thank researcher Jolie T for helping me in this case, and I want to thank all of you for sticking around until the end. Until the next one, guys, don't be afraid to go out there and raise some hell. I'll see you later.